Little Fox.
Thumbelina, Chapter 14, The Great Escape. Thumbelina and Pete were in trouble.
Thumbelina, go back to my house,
Mrs. Gray yelled.
Slim, down here!
Mr. Rufus shouted.
Mr. Rufus, please.
Begged Thumbelina.
The bird is my friend.
Mr. Rufus waved his cane.
I promised Slim, and I always keep my promises.
He said firmly.
Go put on your dress, Thumbelina,
Said Mrs. Gray, looking at her watch.
It's almost time for the wedding.
I won't marry him.
Thumbelina shouted. Then Mrs. Gray saw the dress on the ground. It was covered in food and mud.
Thumbelina, is that your wedding dress?
She gasped. She held up the dress.
It's ruined. And you gave this bird my food?
Well, that was a waste of time.
Grunted the mole.
Slim is going to eat him anyway.
Suddenly, a big, hairy paw pushed down through the hole.
Smells like that bird is alive, Rufus. All the better.
Growled Slim. Pete stared at the coyote's sharp claws above him. He froze with fear. Thumbelina had to think fast. The coyote was almost through the hole. Thumbelina had an idea and began to sing to Pete.
Pete, listen to me.
She sang.
Huh? What?
Pete stared at Thumbelina. He looked confused.
Where did you learn that song?
Thumbelina remembered the secret talking songs from Chris and Maggie. She was singing,
I will wave my wedding dress. The coyote will be confused. Then quickly fly up as fast as you can. I'll hang on to you.
It's too dangerous,
said Pete.
How can you sing at a time like this?
Cried Mrs. Gray.
She does have such a pretty voice.
Mr. Rufus sighed. He was moving his cane in time with the song. Thumbelina sang the song again. She stared at Pete.
Are you sure?
He asked.
We can do it.
Sang Thumbelina.
Now, Pete.
She shouted. Thumbelina grabbed the dress from Mrs. Gray. She swung it around. The nuts and seeds went flying in the air. Some nuts fell on the mouse and the mole.
Oh!
They cried. Thumbelina let the dress go. The wind caught the dress and blew it toward Slim.
At last.
Slim said hungrily. He bit the dress.
Pete!
Thumbelina shouted loudly. Pete spread his wings and shot up straight through the hole. Thumbelina grabbed his leg.
What? This isn't a bird.
Slim realized his mistake. But it was too late.
Thumbelina!
Shouted Mrs. Gray and Mr. Rufus from the tunnel.
My dinner!
Shouted Slim, jumping up and down. Thumbelina, Chapter 15, Coming Home. Thumbelina climbed onto Pete's back. They were safe.
We did it, Pete!
She shouted.
That was a great plan.
He said. Thumbelina and Pete flew a long time without stopping.
If you get cold, get under my feathers.
He said to her.
Hey, how did you learn the secret talking songs?
I met two birds named Chris and Maggie.
Said Thumbelina proudly.
They taught me.
You learned well, my friend.
Said Pete.
Are you okay?
Thumbelina was worried about his strength.
It feels great to fly.
He said.
I don't have wings,
Said Thumbelina.
but here I am flying.
She looked down below. She saw rows of houses. Their roofs were covered with snow. Some children had made snowmen.
I know just the place to go.
Said Pete.
Take your time.
Said Thumbelina.
I want to see the world.
They flew over a lake. Thumbelina saw something on the water.
I see some ducks.
She said, pointing.
That's good news. It means we're almost there.
Said Pete. Now the air felt warmer. The scene below changed too.
I can see green trees, Pete,
She called out.
and flowers.
They flew by a flower garden.
From up here, it looks like a bowl of colorful candies.
She exclaimed.
I'm going to stop.
Said Pete. They landed in a garden near the flowers. Thumbelina looked around. Some red flowers were growing right next to them. The flowers had not opened yet.
They're so pretty.
Said Thumbelina. She thought they might be tulips, but she wasn't sure.
This is where you belong.
Said Pete.
What do you mean?
Asked Thumbelina.
When I first saw you,
Began Pete.
I knew you were far away from home.
I know. My home is with Mrs. Marigold.
Said Thumbelina.
No, it isn't. Not really. It's here.
Said Pete.
I don't understand.
Said Thumbelina.
Soon you will.
Replied Pete.
Goodbye, Thumbelina. Thank you for everything.
No, don't go.
Pleaded Thumbelina.
Don't worry. We'll see each other again.
Promised Pete. Thumbelina watched her friend fly away.
Goodbye, Pete.
She shouted after him. Suddenly, one of the flowers began to shake. It was the biggest one. Then the petals slowly opened one by one.
Oh my.
Gasped Thumbelina. She stared inside the flower.
Who disturbs my sleep?
A little man stepped out of the flower. He was the same size as Thumbelina.
I'm sorry.
Stammered Thumbelina.
I didn't mean to shout so loud.
The man stared at Thumbelina. She stared at him.
Are those wings?
She asked. The man had a pair of wings on his back. Thumbelina, Chapter 16, Seeing the World. The tiny man introduced himself.
I am Prince Fada. This is the kingdom of the flower fairies.
He began to whistle. All the other flowers started to open up. Each flower had a tiny person like Thumbelina inside. Everyone smiled at her.
This might be where I belong.
she whispered to herself. Thumbelina was surprised and happy to see people like her.
My name is Thumbelina,
She said.
Do you live in the flowers?
Yes, each flower is home to one of us.
Laughed the prince.
But where is your home?
I don't really know, Prince Fada.
Said Thumbelina.
I just know what I enjoy doing, like looking at the stars.
We sit in our flowers and watch the night sky.
Said the prince.
Then we all sing together.
Really?
Asked Thumbelina, remembering Mrs. Marigold's windowsill.
What kind of flower do you sleep in?
Asked the prince.
My bed was a walnut shell with a blanket of tulip petals.
Thumbelina replied.
Yes, tulips are our people's favorite flower.
Said Prince Fada. Thumbelina was very excited.
Please tell me how you found us.
Said the prince. So Thumbelina told him everything that had happened.
Yes, our people love adventures too.
Agreed the prince.
But singing kept me strong and happy.
Said Thumbelina. Prince Fada's eyes shone.
Yes, we all have lovely voices and love to sing.
I found that I could learn bird songs easily.
Said Thumbelina.
We are great friends with birds.
Said Prince Fada. Then, after a moment, he said,
I believe you are one of us. You look like us. You sound like us.
But there is one thing that is different.
Thumbelina said.
I don't have wings.
Prince Fada smiled.
Yes, you do.
He whistled a happy tune. Another fairy brought a pair of wings. She put them on Thumbelina.
They're beautiful.
Thumbelina said excitedly. She could not believe it. She smiled shyly at the prince.
And they fit perfectly.
He said. Thumbelina turned to look at her wings.
Now I can go wherever I want,
She said joyfully. The prince frowned.
But don't you want to stay here with me? You can become my princess. We can live happily together.
Thumbelina looked at him. Then she looked up at the sky.
Before, I didn't know where I belonged.
She said.
Now I know, but I want to see Mrs. Marigold again. After that, I want to see the world. Then I will happily return home. Don't worry, Prince. I promise to come back.
Thumbelina shook her wings and flew toward the sky. Her adventure as Thumbelina was over. But her life as a fairy was just about to begin.